Thanksgiving is a holiday that is all about tradition, and in our family, we like to celebrate it at our home in Sag Harbor.
Hi, come on in. Welcome to B. Smith Thanksgiving Style. You know, I've always loved this time of the year. When I was growing up in Western Pennsylvania, Thanksgiving was my mother's favorite holiday. And it was the time of the year when the entire family would gather at our house for dinner. And I loved helping my mother out. You know, all the preparations from cleaning the china to polishing the silver to setting the table and, of course, getting together the ingredients for a fabulous meal. And even now, I start my Thanksgiving preparations about 2 weeks in advance. And in the next hour, I'll show you some easy and elegant ways to make this happen for you and your family without all the stress. And I'll start with some simple ways to decorate your home using seasonal items that you can easily find. And then we'll make some hot apple cider with mulling spices. Great taste, and it fills your home with such a wonderful aroma. And I've always felt that the key to entertaining is organization. So I have some great tips on how you can plan things out for your home. And of course, the main event, the Thanksgiving meal. I'll show you a way to prepare pumpkin pie with some shortcuts that I use. And then we'll move on to some make-ahead side dishes that you won't want to miss. And we'll dress up some items from my backyard to create a bountiful centerpiece, and then finish off the table with a pretty place setting. And of course, the turkey's next. But you know me, while I love tradition, I also enjoy a little twist. So I'm going to share my family's favorite recipe for jerk roast turkey. With cornbread dressing. It's all next on B. Smith Thanksgiving Style. Fall is definitely one of my favorite seasons, and I really enjoy adding decorative touches all around my home. It puts me even further into the Thanksgiving spirit. One of the first places I start is in the powder room. I think it's really nice to add a fall shower curtain and bath towels, and to pick up some pretty inexpensive paper hand towels for your guests. It makes your life a lot easier. And to place a small seasonal arrangement on the sink looks really pretty. And hand soaps, if you can find them in fall colors, that's really nice too. And finally, why not place a scented candle with an autumnal fragrance like apple or cinnamon or even pumpkin? It makes such a nice addition to the room. And the kitchen, though, is another area I like to bring fall touches in. I pile up seasonal fruits and vegetables on a cake stand. It looks beautiful. And sometimes I like to add fall-looking cloth dish towels that are fun and functional. It's nice to also place a plant or seasonal arrangement. Now, my friend Barbara Scott gave me this beautiful fall topiary. And when we have company, we tend to spend a lot of time in the living room. So here, I've added a cozy throw for chilly nights. Sometimes we love to light a fire, and some comfy and colorful throw pillows are beautiful. And these hurricanes are something I use all year long. And by changing the pillar candles and adding some nuts, they can be transformed to fit right into the Thanksgiving season. I love to make my house look special, and I think my family and guests enjoy it too. And speaking of guests, I'd like to welcome everyone into my home with a special treat. So come with me into the kitchen and we'll make some hot mulled apple cider. Serving hot mulled cider is a great way to greet your guests. And it's also a way to make your house smell wonderful, and it couldn't be easier. Now, for this recipe, I'm using 6 cups of apple cider, and what I do is, I happen to like to use these little muslin bags from the craft store, but you can also use cheesecloth and twine if you like. But I think that this is a prettier presentation. I'm gonna add some dried orange and lemon slices. Now, if you can't find dried orange or lemon slices, you can, of course, make them yourself. All you do is slice the oranges and the lemons very thin. You're going to put them on a cookie sheet and put them in an oven that's about 170 to 200 degrees. And it takes them about an hour and a half to dry out. You can keep an eye on them so that they don't burn, and they also make the house smell really good. Now, to my little bag with the orange and lemon slices, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of whole clove. And then I'm going to add a tablespoon of allspice berries. Okay, into that 4 cinnamon sticks. And we have our little pouch. Once you've made your bundle, you want to put it in your apple cider, and you're going to let this cook on medium-low heat, and you're going to stir it occasionally. But be careful, do not bring it to a boil. You just want it to simmer, you want it to be nice and warm, and it's ready to serve. Now, when my guests arrive, I sometimes like to have a whole tray filled and just meet them at the door. It's really a nice welcome. Or I like to put it in a decorative carafe like this, and then I have it around the house, and it's nice and warm when anybody wants to pour themselves a second cup. And I think the chef should always have a cup too to taste. So I'm going to add an orange slice to my cup, a lemon slice, a stick of cinnamon, and then I'm going to garnish with nutmeg. That's the real kicker, adds a nice flavor. And as I said, it smells so good. That's delicious. Now, I like to make these little bundles and give them as gifts. I include the apple cider, or sometimes I even give people a little bit of red wine to make mulled wine, but be sure to include the recipe. Now, when we come back, I'm going to share some tips with you on how to organize for Thanksgiving.
And later, I'll show you how to make my recipe for pumpkin pie, a Thanksgiving favorite, using one of my entertaining shortcuts. Plus, some easy recipes for delicious make-ahead side dishes that will save you time.
You know, the key to successful entertaining is organization, especially for a large holiday like Thanksgiving. Now, I like to start about 2 weeks in advance, and I'll tell you the first thing I do is I write down my menu, what I'm going to be serving, and then I go to my books. Now, you know, I write books, I've got a TV show, and I cook a lot, but even I need to go back and look at those recipes to make sure that I'm going to have all the ingredients I want. So what I do is I like to keep them on a card like this, and first thing I do is I go to my pantry and I make sure that I have everything I'm going to need. Now, have you ever been in the middle of preparing something and you didn't have a very important ingredient? I hate that. So now to eliminate that, I'll make my shopping list. I'll make sure that I look here and see what I have. I'm going to be making corn pudding, so there's my corn. And of course, I've got my jerk sauce here. I'm sure I might be missing a spice or two, so I'll check out my spice drawer before I leave too. It's important for me to really then go to the refrigerator to look at the perishables, make sure I have everything I need, and if there's anything I might have in the freezer, I go there too, so that there are no mistakes and I don't make myself crazy. Now, these are my tools of the trade. I always make sure that my roasting pan and my rack are in good condition. Now, I'm a baster. I baste and baste and baste, so it's really important for me to have a great baster in good shape. Even when I buy a turkey that has a pop-up thermometer in it, I always have a handy thermometer of my own at home to use. And my daughter is away at school. She always likes to take food back in containers. And then if I'm going to freeze anything, I have freezer bags. And of course, you can't do a big meal like this without handy wipes and Reynolds wrap. So the next thing I do is I think about all of my serving utensils. And it's important to me that, you know, I'm like really, really specific about what I have here. So I like to put little Post-its in every container. I'm going to use this one for the greens over here. So I think that everything is marked. And even the serving spoons, the knives, just so the day of, I just don't make myself crazy. Oh, and here's my pumpkin pie plate. And when we come back, I'm going to show you an easy recipe with one of my shortcuts for a great tasting pumpkin pie. No matter how much food my guests seem to eat when I have Thanksgiving dinner, they always save a little bit of room for dessert. Now, to me, it wouldn't be Thanksgiving if you didn't have pumpkin pie. And I'm going to show you a recipe that I have that is for great tasting pie. Now, you could use your own crust, and I'm sure many of you make a great crust. But if you're crust challenged, I have a frozen pastry dough that I happen to like. It's made by Pillsbury. It comes in a package of 2, and I just bring that to room temperature, take it out of the package, unfold it, like this. Now I always keep a little bit of water around because the dough is very malleable by this time, but you want to press the dough in place and just sort of work with it. But the water is good because if you have any cracks in your dough as you're working with it, the water will actually be very good to help seal it back up. So there. And then press out the lines. And again, the water is very helpful. The next thing I'm going to do is finish off the edge of my pie crust. Now, some people like to scallop it and some people like to just trim it with a fork. This is what I like to do. I just sort of like to press it like that. I'll just bend this a little bit and it'll make it a little easier. And it'll probably go a little faster too when I do it like this. But to crimp them, I just use the 2 fingers and this 1 knuckle, and I just push it in like that. It's very simple, and it looks so professional, and it's so easy to do. Again, as I said, when you have the pie crust at room temperature, it's pretty malleable, and it's easy to play with, and that's what I feel like I'm doing with my pie crust right now. Now, everybody has their own technique, as I said before, but this one seems to work very well for me. Again, just sort of press it like that and just keep turning your pie pan. I think that refrigerated or frozen pie crust is a real style shortcut. And you know, the way this pie disappears, no one ever knows the difference. There. Now that looks pretty professional, doesn't it? So for my filling, I'm using 2 cups of pumpkin puree. And I'm going to add to that evaporated milk. And this is another one of those recipes where you can put all the ingredients in and then stir. I'm using 3 eggs that have been beaten. Light brown sugar, but of course if you want, you can use dark brown sugar. And I'm going to put in cinnamon and ginger and nutmeg and cloves. This is a nicely spiced pumpkin pie with great flavor. And then of course I have to put some salt in it. And it wouldn't be pumpkin pie without, of course, sugar. And that's granulated white sugar. I'm going to mix this up. And as I said before, you can't go wrong with this recipe. Just make sure that you mix it well because it's got all these great spices in it. And by the time my guests have had their dinner, they don't even want the whipped cream that goes with it. They just go straight for the pie. And that fills the pie shell very nicely. Very good. I preheated the oven to 425 degrees for about 15 minutes and then lowered the heat to 350 degrees and baked the pie for 45 minutes or until the filling is firm. To prevent the crust from over browning, you want to cover it with a pie crust shield, and if you don't have a pie crust shield, then use thin strips of aluminum foil, and that's after the first 20 minutes of baking. This smells wonderful. Now, you want to make sure that you let the pie cool, and you can either serve it at room temperature or slightly warm. This is going to look fabulous on my buffet. Stay with me because next I've got some ideas for sassy side dishes that will put you way ahead of your schedule.
Up next, my recipe for winter greens and candied yams. And later, we'll visit a cranberry bog in Massachusetts to see how one of my favorite Thanksgiving ingredients is harvested.
Now, here's what I recommend to avoid spending a lot of time in the kitchen during the Thanksgiving gathering. I like to pick a few quick and easy dishes that I can make the day before. Now, it wouldn't be Thanksgiving at my house if I didn't have winter greens and candied yams, but my recipe is slightly different from my mother's recipe. So let me start with the greens first. I'm using 2 pounds of collard greens, I'm using kale, and I'm using mustard greens. And what I do to save time is I purchase them a couple days in advance, I clean them, and I slice them up, and I put them in plastic resealable bags. Now, this actually will last you anywhere from 2 to 5 days if you keep it stored in the refrigerator. So this makes it really easy. Now, my pot is hot here, and I'm going to be adding a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And again, my mother cooked her greens for the longest time, and she did it with ham hock. So I'm going to be using smoked turkey because it adds a great flavor. But to the olive oil, I'm going to add some garlic. Okay, I'm going to let that saute for a few minutes, and then I'm going to be adding an onion that I've sliced thinly. So I layer my flavor in this way. I just add the onions. And I'm going to cook these and let them soften. As I said, you really want to make sure that you saute these, but you don't want them to be overcooked or browned. So that's going to cook just for a few minutes. And what I have over here is I have about 8 cups of chicken, or you could use turkey stock. I'm going to add about 3 cups. And again, this is warm. Okay. I'm going to let it cook down for a few minutes and then begin to add my spices. I'm using 3 bay leaves, and these are fresh bay leaves, 2 teaspoons of crushed red pepper, and I'm using 2 teaspoons of thyme. And then I'm going to begin to add my greens. And I like to start with the collard greens because they're the sturdier of the greens. Put the entire bag. As you can see, it really fills up the pot. I mean, 2 pounds of greens are a lot of greens, but then I always like to have leftovers. So I'll let this cook down for a few minutes. And I like to use tongs because I can really move the greens around in the pot. Okay, now this is cooking down nicely. So next I'm going to add the kale. These greens are also good that you could have them separately, or like I do, I like to have them in combination. Okay, I want to make sure that I get all the greens in there. Now, I'll let that cook for a few minutes. And what I'm going to do today is I'm not going to cook the greens all the way. I'm going to cook them halfway, and then I'm going to put them in a serving dish, and I'll heat them up again tomorrow before the big meal. Preparing foods in advance really gives you more time to spend with your guest. I always love that. Look how beautifully these have cooked down. And they're beginning to smell good too. Now, when I'm working in the kitchen, I sometimes forget to put on my apron, so I've got a little smudge on me, but hey, it's cooking, right? We're in the kitchen. Now, Dan happens to like the mustard greens because they have a little kick to them. So I'm gonna add those. And these are actually the thinnest and the finest of the greens, and that's why I add them last. When I cook like this and I'm preparing things in advance, it's a lot more fun than being rushed and hassled the day of. Now I'm going to put in the remainder of the stock. Let that continue to cook for a few minutes. I'm adding my turkey, and it's about 3 cups of chopped smoked turkey. Now, of course, if you wanted to, you could take the whole turkey wing and you could use that. And as I said before, my mother used to use ham hocks, and that was great flavor too, but I sometimes have people who come to visit me on Thanksgiving who don't eat pork, so that's why I substitute the smoked turkey. So this looks very good. I'm gonna put the lid on for a few minutes and just let this cook a little bit longer. Now I'm going to turn on the back burner. And I'm going to move the greens to the back and start on my candied yams. Now, these have been cooked and have drained, and I used about 8 medium yams. The great thing about Thanksgiving is that there are so many sides that even when it looks like and feels like you're not cooking a lot, you really are, because there's really something for everyone. I'm going to put butter in now, and I'm using 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to let this melt. I like to cut my yams to about this size, and I like them to be firm when I get to this point. So as I said before, I added my butter. I'm going to make sure that the butter melts. And there's a little moisture in the bottom of my saucepan here, so that's always good. And I just want the butter to melt a little bit more. And then I'm going to add ginger, cinnamon, and nutmeg, and it's a teaspoon and a half of each. So I've already measured that out. And again, that's another thing that I like to do. I like to pre-measure as much as possible and make sure that I have all my ingredients in front of me. And then I'm going to add brown sugar. And this is 1.5 cups of brown sugar, and I like to use dark brown sugar. I mean, after all, they're called candied yams, right? And now I'm going to put in a cup of orange juice. Ooh. So I'll let these cook until they caramelize for a few minutes. And just stir occasionally, because I don't want to overwork them, because I still like them to have that nice shape to them. So I'll let these cook for a few minutes until everything has melted together. The candied yams look perfect. At this point, what I like to do is I like to use functional but pretty oven-to-table pieces. I'm using Emile Henry because they come in great colors and they're easy to store in the refrigerator and they look nice on the buffet table. So I'm going to put my yams right in here. Make sure they're all in there. And see how they kept their shape? They really look pretty. Now at this point, what I like to do is I like to let the yams cool to room temperature. So I'll put them aside over here, and once they've cooled, I'm going to cover them, put them in the refrigerator, and then tomorrow bring them to room temperature before I put them in the oven. I've already prepared mashed potatoes. And tomorrow what I'll do is I'll also put those in the oven. And I'm going to garnish them when I take them out of the oven with a little parsley. Again, let my greens cool to room temperature. I'm pretty pleased with myself. I have 3 dishes completed. Now, don't go away, because I've got a few more make-ahead dishes for you. A corn pudding that my daughter absolutely loves, and my must-have cranberry persimmon sauce.
But first, we'll visit a cranberry bog in Massachusetts to see how they harvest one of my favorite Thanksgiving ingredients. A few years ago, I had a wonderful opportunity to visit a cranberry bog in Massachusetts to find out how this key ingredient in my Thanksgiving menu is harvested. It was the perfect fall day, and the bright crimson color of the berries looked beautiful floating in the water. Owner John Dekas was kind enough to show me around and explain the various methods of harvesting. This is quite a process, and one that is a bit tricky, as the bogs and berries are both delicate. I even put on some waders and got a chance to go out into the bog with one of the harvesters. They work quickly and carefully so as not to disturb the fragile condition of the bog after they flood it. Once the berries come to the surface, they are corralled with padded ropes. The berries are pumped from the bog into large trucks for shipping. But the process doesn't end there. The berries are washed several times and need to be given what they call the bounce test. The second method of harvesting is what they call dry harvest. These berries are carefully gathered by harvesters and placed in large wooden crates. The crates are lifted off the bog via helicopter, as driving in trucks would destroy the gentle land. It's quite an operation. Spending the day at the cranberry bog gave me a whole new appreciation for cooking with cranberries.
Now, everyone has their own recipe for cranberry sauce, and some people even serve it out of the can. But my favorite recipe that is really a big hit in my house is a cranberry persimmon sauce, and let me show you exactly how I make it. It's pretty easy. I use 12 ounces of cranberries, which is 1 bag. I'm using 1.5 cups of sugar. The real key to my cranberry sauce are the persimmons. That makes it special. And what I do is I peel them and cube them, and I'm using 2 large persimmons. They add a really nice texture and a nice sweet flavor. I also use orange juice. As a side with the turkey, it's nice to have something that is sweet, and I'm using orange zest. So just stir that. Then I'm going to put it on the flame here, and it's medium-high heat, and I'm going to let this cook until the sugar dissolves, and then I'm going to turn down the heat and let it simmer for about 10 minutes until the berries have popped. Now, the recipe that you'll see on my website also calls for triple sec and chopped walnuts, but today I decided that I didn't want to do it for this Thanksgiving, but of course it's an option that you can use if you want to or not. And after the berries have popped and this is cooked down a little bit, then I'm going to add ground cloves to it. So I'm going to let this cook, and I'm going to start on my corn pudding. Now, when I was growing up, this is another dish that my mother made that was a big hit in our house, and it was one of my favorites. I'm using whole kernel corn, and I'm using cream corn so that it has a nice creamy texture, but yet you get those kernels. Now, I'm using canned corn, but of course, you could also use fresh corn if you want to. Now, I'm putting this in, and then I'm adding my evaporated milk. Let me just turn down the cranberry sauce. Those berries are already popping. Now, I do have other recipes that I've used that I have on my website, but with this recipe, I particularly like using canned corn. So I'm going to add 4 beaten eggs to this. This is a very forgiving recipe. And when I say that, what I mean is it doesn't matter what order you put the ingredients in up until now. And then you're just going to be adding your brown sugar. And I like to make sure that I sprinkle it in, and I use dark brown sugar, but of course if you want you can use light brown sugar. I'm adding nutmeg, white pepper, and salt. And I think for this dish that the white pepper works much better than the coarse black pepper. And you want to make sure that you mix this thoroughly. And to this I'm adding melted butter. And I'm going to be adding cornstarch, and I've mixed that with a little bit of water. And the cornstarch will help to thicken it as it's baking. Ah, this is smelling great and it looks great. I'm going to bake this for about 45 minutes, but the first thing that I need to do is spray my baking pan. You could also use butter if you like, but it's so much easier to just spray it. And once you've put this in the oven, as I said, you'll bake it for about 45 minutes or until a fork inserted in the center comes out clean. This is a big hit in my house.
And when we come back, I'll share some easy ways to transform some everyday items from your backyard and show you how to use them to create a festive centerpiece. Then we'll set a beautiful Thanksgiving table guaranteed to make your guests feel special.
look what I just found in my backyard. These are gonna look great when I transform them for my holiday table. Now, this is a very easy craft that I like to do and have been doing for years. I just use different colors of spray paint. Who knew? And I can transform pumpkins and gourds and pine cones and even leaves into fantastic colors. So let me just show you what I do here. I like to use a surface that's been covered with paper, and I use a box like this because I like to contain the spray and the fumes. That looks beautiful in seconds. Let me just show you one with the gourd here. This is a mini pumpkin. And I'm just adding a little sheen to that. Now, I'll leave these out here to dry, and on a day like this that's nice and sunny and cool, they're gonna dry quickly. Now, come inside with me and I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna use my created items on my holiday table. You know, setting the table is one of my favorite jobs. It was when I was a little girl when I was working with my mother, and it is to this day. The difference between my mother and what I do is my mother had several sets of china, and every time we sat at the table, we were really setting a set. But what I like to do is I like to mix and match, and I like to coordinate things. But remember when I was outside and I was spray painting a few things? Well, they're part of my centerpiece, so let me just put these in here, because I think that they look, doesn't the pumpkin look great? And then just a few more cones. Now, if you'll look at some of the other items I have in the centerpiece, you'll see these little jeweled pumpkins and gourds. Now those I purchased a couple years ago, and I make sure that I wrap them nicely and I put them away, and every year when I feel like it, I bring them out and they're part of the decorations. That's what I think is fun. I like to collect all types of different items that I use on my table. The other thing is placemats. I don't think you could ever have too many placemats, and these are very pretty and festive. It's great for Thanksgiving in the autumn, but this works almost any time of the year, and you can really use a lot of different colors with it, so that's very pretty. Now, when I was putting together my actual place setting, I was thinking to myself, okay, do I want to use china or, well, I decided to use my everyday plates, or at least a set of my everyday plates, because it really fits into the autumnal look. That looks very pretty. And then I just took a napkin in green that coordinated with my placemat. Now I'm gonna add another color of green here because, as I said before, it's not about perfection. This is about really pulling things together, and I think that it makes me feel like I have a great eye, that I'm an artist. I'm adding copper to it, and it's got a little shimmer to it, so it dresses up this plate. Now, I actually have several sets of flatware. I cannot tell a lie, and I can't resist them. And I love these for this particular table because of the gold tone that's in them. And you've got to take a look at this. These are leaves that will last me forever. Again, found them on sale, and I always find the perfect place to put them. For my place cards, and I think that it's really always important to have place cards, I like to use fruits. So I'm using crab apples and miniature pears. It's really easy. All you're doing here is you're gonna make a slit in your fruit, and then you're gonna put your place card in. It's that simple. Now that's Dana. Now speaking of Dana, she loves to play around with her computer, and so she surprised me by creating some menus for me, and she used different fonts and a little raffia and ribbon and things like that. I think she's a chip off the old block. And anyway, I decided to choose this one because I like the leaves here. So that's our menu card for today. Now I like the way it coordinates with the rest of the table. Because I wanted the entire table to have an autumnal look, I decided to use some sheer curtains that I had to dress up the chairs. And let me just go back and recap about my table, because this is not about perfection. This is about passion for me. If you look at the centerpiece that I have here, you see beads and you see a lot of gold and a lot of glimmer. That was the centerpiece that I said, okay, this I'm gonna build my table around. So from the cloths that I'm using to the napkins that just have a little bit of shine to them, And even the candles, you know, the color doesn't quite match, but yet it coordinates so nicely with the table. Even the glasses, they just have a tiny bit of shimmer to them. I'm so excited. Doesn't the table look beautiful? Now, when we come back, I'll be in the kitchen to prepare my family's favorite recipe for jerk roast turkey and cornbread dressing. So don't go away.
And later, I'll show you how it all comes together, from my recipes to the beverages to an elegantly set table, when we come back on B. Smith Thanksgiving Style.
There are so many ways you can prepare your Thanksgiving turkey. Now, my family happens to love jerk roast turkey with a cornbread jalapeno dressing. You know, anytime I try to change, they're like, no, Bea, you have to make the traditional turkey that we have in our house. So the most important thing about marinating the turkey is that it really keeps it full of flavor. So let me just tell you what I do. When I start marinating the turkey, I like to use Vernon's jerk sauce. Now, I've used different types of jerk seasoning. Sometimes I use a dry seasoning, and I use that with a little bit of olive oil, and I massage it into the turkey, but I keep coming back to Vernon. So this is about 2 cups of marinade. I like to put my turkey in a 2-gallon resealable plastic bag. It just makes it so much less messy. And I've already cleaned this turkey, removed the giblets. Now, in the past, I've heard stories, horror stories about people who've cooked their turkey with the giblets in it. But you want to make sure that you clean your turkey and remove the giblets. And they're great to use for your gravy. So you're going to boil those, and you'll use the giblets with your gravy. But what I'm going to do here is just unfasten the turkey thighs and really make sure you pour about half of this into the cavity of the turkey. And then you want to just sort of swish it around and make sure that that flavor gets distributed inside. And for the rest of it, you just begin to pour. And I'm going to do again about half of this on the back of the turkey. Make sure you get it under the wings. Yeah, just like that. And massaging that bird. And then I'll just pour the rest on top. Yeah, it is pretty messy, isn't it? But it's easy to clean up. What I'm going to do, once I reseal this, is I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, and you can marinate it from 24 up to 48 hours, and you have to turn it occasionally. I prefer the longer length of time because I like it really well seasoned. Now, when you think of jerk sauce, you think Jamaican and you think really spicy. Well, yeah, it originated in Jamaica, but this is not quite as spicy as you think. This is going to be well seasoned. So, now, this is ready to go in the refrigerator. You have to have plenty of damp cloths around for this. Just clean up a little bit here. Hey, I should have had on my apron earlier when I was tossing a little food on my top, so you know I prepared myself this time. Now this is ready to go in, and as I said before, you just want to be sure to, you know, massage it a little, turn it upside down, turn it over, and then that flavor will really be distributed throughout the turkey. But of course, I have one that's already been prepared. Just move this over to the side. And what I like to do is I like to take damp paper cloths and really remove as much of the jerk seasoning as I possibly can, because I like my bird to brown evenly. So just be sure that you wipe that really good. And I've already taken some out of the inside, and this is looking pretty clean. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be stuffing my bird. Now, for my cornbread jalapeno dressing, it's really dressing if you put it in a casserole dish, but when you put it in the cavity of the turkey, of course, it's stuffing. And I'm going to actually make 2 batches because I'm going to bake one off in a casserole, and then I'll have the one that I stuff in my turkey. Let me just tell you what I do. And again, so that I save as much time as possible, I like to do all my chopping in advance. And this is the jalapeno pepper. And I put a little paper towel in here just to keep it moist. And these are my onions, and this is my celery. So this is about as much as I'm going to use. And again, this adds great flavor. And it reminds me of my mother because she used to have her iron skillet, and she'd put her butter in, and then she'd put her celery and her onions. And we weren't doing the jalapeno then, but again, I told you my family cannot live without it. So I use a little turkey stock in here, and I use eggs, and I use sage and thyme, and I've already mixed them up. So I'm going to begin to fill the cavity. And of course, like my mother, I like to use my hands. I like to press the dressing, stuffing inside. You know, in the restaurant, we like to serve a jerk turkey too. In this past season, or last year, I decided, okay, I'll do something I'll do the regular turkey. And the customers are like, B, where is the jerk turkey? So I was like, okay, we're going back to the turkey. And I guess it's just going to be a staple in our restaurant. This is looking very good. Now, you know what I like about this particular turkey? The size of it. It's a nice size. And they make sure that they have the skin here so that I can take this drumstick, and I have a little bit more to put in here. But I can take the drumsticks and I can stick it under the loose skin that's here. I'm going to clean this up before I finish, but there. Now, some people trust their birds, but this sort of makes it very easy, very compact. So this is almost ready. Now, I'll clean it up a bit more before I put it in my roasting pan. And it's ready for butter, a little coarse salt and pepper. It's almost like my friend, isn't it? I'm talking to this bird like it is my friend, and it will be when my guests come. So let me just clean this up a bit. Get the roasting pan. Hey, where's Dan and Dana when I need them to clean up the kitchen? So I like to use a nice roasting pan, a nice large roasting pan with a rack in it. And this will hold the turkey in place. Now, I've already tucked the wings underneath this particular turkey. I'm just going to put it in like that. It is almost ready to go. I'll butter it, put the salt and pepper on it, and I like to use soft butter. And I'm using about 1/4 cup here. Okay, now my salt and pepper. Okay, this looks good. And the other thing that I do is I like to put some stock, or you could put water if you don't have stock. And even if it's canned stock, I think that it's good, in the bottom of my roasting pan. And this is going to be the beginning of what I baste my turkey with. So I'm going to just wipe my hands again. I'm going to put this in the oven. Now, I preheated the oven to 500 degrees, and now I'm going to turn it down to 350 degrees, as I said before. And I like to use a thermometer, and I'm really into making sure that the temperature is either at 180 or 185 degrees in the thigh area. The breast area would be 180 degrees. And if you have a pop-up turkey, like I said before, then that's great too, because you can really see when it's done. This is going to cook 3.5 to 4 hours. And remember, basting, basting, basting.
By basting your turkey faithfully every 30 minutes, the meat will stay moist and tender. Now, you may need to add a little more stock to the bottom of the pan as it cooks, so you have enough liquid to work with. Basting is a small step that makes a big difference. Next, dinner is ready. See how my Thanksgiving celebration comes together when we come back on B. Smith Thanksgiving Style.
I think everything is just about ready. Now, when I was asked which beverages I'd be serving for Thanksgiving, I said red, white, and turkey. I've selected a Pinot Noir because I think its intense, complex flavors complement all the side dishes. And I also like to have a selection of whites, such as Sauvignon Blanc. It's perfect for the jerk turkey. And I happen to like Chardonnay, so I'm going to be offering that as well. And for a special non-alcoholic drink, I'm serving a sparkling cranberry iced tea, and this recipe will be on my website. And I hope you'll be able to use a few of the ideas for your Thanksgiving. I've certainly covered a lot of things, so let's highlight a few of the things that we've talked about. Now, get yourself into the seasonal spirit by adding decorative touches all around the house. And serve some hot apple cider made with mulling spices. It really fills your home with a great fragrance of fall. And be organized. Consider starting your holiday preparations about 2 weeks in advance. And take the time to get all the recipes together, take stock of what you have in your pantry, and make sure that your roasting pan and other cooking essentials are in great shape. And lay out and label your serving pieces. And to make life a little easier on yourself, bake your pumpkin pie a day or two in advance. And if you're tight on time, don't be afraid to use a refrigerated pie crust. And another stress-reducing hint is to make your side dishes in advance. Store them in the refrigerator in functional but pretty oven-to-table pieces so that you can just bring them to the table after they've been heated up. And by all means, take advantage of the seasonal items that you find in your backyard or in the supermarket and dress them up a little bit with a little spray paint and create that special touch on your tabletop. And finally, for a twist on the traditional turkey, try my recipe for jerk roast turkey and cornbread jalapeno dressing. It's moist, flavorful, and delicious. Thanksgiving is a wonderful time to entertain and be with your family and friends, and I hope some of these ideas and recipes will inspire you to create your own memories. I say happy Thanksgiving, and remember, whatever you do, just do it with style.